Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cupid's Coach podcast. I'm your host, Julie Ferman, inviting you to transform me to we through your process of doing that dating thing a little better than you used to. Now, today's a really interesting one for me. I have a special guest. She's a friend of mine, she's a colleague, and I've never done a show about this. It's about ethical non-monogamy. And my guest is Victoria Joseph, whose company is called Birds of a Feather. Welcome to the program, Victoria.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so fun that we get to be part of this monstrously big and really diverse collection. It's a whole association of matchmakers. There were maybe I knew 5 or 7 matchmakers when I started 30 something years ago. And now there are literally thousands. And a lot of them have sort of a similar niche, it's a lot of them, it's high net worth people looking for somebody special. Um, I had Tammy Shackley on the program, and she specializes in LGBTQ, and Victoria Joseph specializes in what we call ethical non-monogamy, ENM. So I looked it up. You probably
hmm
could recite the definition, but it says open relationships, polyamorous, swinger lifestyle relationships. Those are all underneath the umbrella of what you handle.
Exactly, yes.
How is it that you
And
got inspired? I know you're married to a lovely gentleman named Ryan. How did you get inspired to focus on this niche, and how did you two meet?
oh my gosh. So I'll start with how we met. We were both in the military and we were both stationed in Japan. And so him and I met at a small house party. And actually, I met him on my way out as I was leaving, and I talked to his friends throughout the evening. And they invited me to go Mario karting with them on the streets of Tokyo. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And him and I got in touch. And a few days later, I was Peach and he was Mario. And then we've been hanging out ever since. And that was in February 2016. And the idea of non-monogamy came to me from a quite an early age. I learned about the term swinging when I was in high school. And I thought to myself, like, oh, you can just, be married, live a normal life, but you can still like have fun with other people. That sounds really amazing. And even at that time too, I was like a little bit bi-curious. And so when Ryan and I were dating for, I think we were like 6 months in, maybe even sooner, we both expressed interest in non-monogamy and like what that could look like for us. So when we were long distance for 6 months, we wrote eroticas to each other back and forth, pretending we were in these like situations. So that was like a really great way to pass time when I was on deployment and he was in Virginia. And then he requested to come back to Japan. And then we were together again for 6 months in Japan and then moved to San Diego. And that's kind of where we really launched our lifestyle journey. And ever since then, just meeting people who have the same mindset as us or similar, were just so authentic. They were so nice. Like these are our people. And so I grew really passionate about non-monogamy and bringing people together. And so I was matching people for fun anyways, like within our circle, within our community. And it was always like the best feeling when someone like hit it off right away. Fast forward to our honeymoon. This was so we moved to San Diego in 2017, which is where we really started being a part of the community. And then we had our honeymoon in November, October, or end of October, early November of 2022. And so while we are honeymooning in Iceland, we were on a road trip. He was driving and I was scrolling on my phone. And there was a screenshot of a matchmaker going around looking for singles for her clients. And I thought to myself, and it was really well received. Everyone's like, yeah, add me in. That sounds great. And I was like, that sounds like a really amazing like career to have because, and I was at a time in my life where I had just finished my MBA and I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what I wanted it to be in yet. And so then this idea popped up shortly after. And I looked into it and I looked to see if there was any matchmakers doing non-monogamous matchmaking and I couldn't find any. So I was like, I would love to be the first one. So I talked to a handful of matchmakers. They were all wonderful. They were lovely. They told me about where to get certified. And so that's what I did. I went and got certified through the Global Love Institute, and then I learned about Matchmakers Alliance. And yeah, I'm officially the first and only certified matchmaker specializing in E&M relationships. There are a couple other E&M matchmakers, but pretty much there's someone who does Miami, New York, and then someone who's in San Francisco, and then there's me here in the Midwest near Chicago.
So my burning question is, what are the rules? And I imagine between two people in a couple who have decided that they want to explore ethical non-monogamy, they're going to talk about what that means to each of them, right?
Oh yeah.
So the rules are
Yeah,
different from one couple to another.
exactly. So the first thing that couples should do when they're interested in exploring this side of themselves, opening their relationship to other people, is figuring out what that might look like and what sounds exciting about it. Because, being polyamorous, being just open and doing things separately, and being a swinger are all different types of experiences that you can have with people. With polyamory, you're opening yourself for feelings and multiple intimate loving relationships. Where open relationship is like you're doing things separately. So you might have a hall pass, you might go on a separate date with someone. And then swinging is when you're doing things together. So a lot of what is talked about in these spaces is that always go as fast as the slowest paced person. So you don't want to overwhelm someone, you don't want to make them uncomfortable, but you still want to figure it out. And typically what happens a lot is that when you're new, you have a lot of rules, you have a lot of boundaries, and so you figure out like what that is. So I can speak for what my husband and I did at first, which eventually you kind of, I call it like leveling up or like growing in the space because you become more fluid, you become more like secure in your relationship. Like, believe it or not, like the more you do this and the more like you have great experiences, it just strengthens your bond with your partner more than you could ever imagine. So for us, for example, we initially were like, oh, we're not going to have any repeats. We're not going to, we're not going to hook up with the same person more than once. This is just for fun. And that kind of ended kind of quickly after we made friends with these people. We were like, we want to hang out more. This was like a lot of fun. So then you kind of grow out of that. Or another one might be like when it comes to communication. So a lot of times couples want to be in the same group chat with other couples or singles, or sometimes in a partnership, one person is a bigger communicator than the other. So figuring out like how much you want to know, when do you want to know the information, plans, all that kind of stuff. And so initially, my husband and I, we were always in the same group chat, but then eventually we figured out like that's not really needed. Like sometimes the group chats kind of fizzle out, whatever. And so we still, and today we still do group chats, but also like we just I'm primarily the plan maker for us. So I keep them informed. This is what we got going on. And there's always discussions about like STD testing, so making sure you're getting that done regularly. So a lot of times couples in the lifestyle are getting that done every 3 to 4 months, or they might take turns, they might stagnate like talking about STDs and getting that all checked out. So believe it or not, in the lifestyle or in these communities, we're so health conscious, and we're so we care for ourselves, we care for others. So talking about sexual health is like very easy to do, and so that gets done a lot. So I actually would feel safer in hooking up with those in the community versus like someone out in the wild or at a bar, like because someone is just so like hesitant to talk about it. So that's kind of like one thing that's like discussed ahead of time, and then making sure that you're using condoms and stuff like that. There are people who don't like to use it, that's on them, but we always like to have an extra layer of protection. So discussing that and like how open you are to that with other new people. Oh, gosh, there's like so many things that like you discuss like ahead of time. Try because what you do is that you try to come up with all sorts of scenarios, like what if this happens, what if that happens, and then you can do your best in that moment. But you are guaranteed to be surprised. Like you are like situations are gonna pop up that you don't know if that's okay or not. But the best thing you can do in situations where you get surprised and you're just trying to have a good time is have a conversation with it about it, and then make changes or adjustments for the next time. And always have grace and forgiveness, and just remember that you're doing this for fun, for connection, for all this, and you're not trying to hurt anybody. You just did your best with the information that you had, and it's kind of like the name of the game, really.
It occurs to me that we talk a lot about attachment styles. There's anxious
Hmm.
attachment, there's avoidant
Avoidant,
attachment, and then
secure.
there's secure. I would imagine that people would need to be pretty securely attached in order for this to happen in a relationship. So do you find that most of the people in this community tend to be pretty securely attached? They're not like anxious, and they're not like, stay away from me.
I would say definitely more on the secure side for sure. But that's clear, it's not definitely not everybody. I would say that it's kind of like all the above. And so different situations where it is all the above is that you have avoidant people who don't want to have connection. They want to have fake names. They just want to do this for fun. So they're kind of avoidant in that kind of way. But then you do have anxious people where they're like, well, what if someone's better than me? What if this doesn't work? What if that? So then they're kind of like on the more anxious side and they're worried about their partner. And so relationships like those two just need more communication, more reassurance, and that happens over time because, jealousy still happens. It's definitely a thing that people work through. And it's just a matter of figuring out like what those triggers might be, like what's upsetting you and talking through it. But definitely the more secure couples, you can definitely tell when someone's a little nervous, when someone is like very like enthusiastic, and you kind of feed off the energy of the people and you have those conversations like, what are you here for tonight? Like, what are you looking for? And you kind of carry it on that way. So primarily, I would say more secure people because we're literally opening ourselves to open communication. They're, yeah, and you can just talk with things like you're opening yourself to up to people and you communicate that with your partner and you just keep doing that over and over and over again.
That was one of my questions, is about jealousy. Do you find that as a couple moves forward, jealousy subsides, or does it still come up with a particular situation where I wasn't jealous at all until this person, right? How does that?
hmm I think that a lot of people who come from traditional monogamous mindset and societal norms, we think are we're like so jealous, we're so possessive, we're so protective of like what's ours, like don't even look at him, like he's all mine. Whereas when you get in these situations, it's like you might start off that way, but then you begin to like rewire your brain and you get to settle down more. Um, and then there's a thing called compersion, which people definitely grow into. And compersion is when you have joy, like you get joy and pleasure seeing your partner having pleasure and joy and giving that to other people. So you turn that jealousy into compersion, like there's really nothing that can really upset you because you're just like everyone's having a great time, so I'm having a great time, and that makes me really happy. So it's like
Well,
a
I
mix of
learned a word
that. Yeah.
today. Thanks, Victoria.
hmm
I was fooling around on Chat GPT and with Merriam-Webster's dictionary because my question was, what counts as sex? Okay, so I looked it up. What counts as sex? Intercourse, one way or another, oral sex, manual stimulation, or mutual masturbation. Both partners engaging with the intent of sexual connection, whether casual or committed. For example, some may consider deep kissing or mutual masturbation as sexual acts, while others may not. And it's fascinating because I was just having a pretty deep conversation a couple of episodes ago with Evan Mark Katz about what kind of conversations do we need to have before we engage in this thing we call sex. And I always figured, well, don't go south of the border, right? You keep your pants on, you can't get in a whole lot of trouble. But he's like, no, that's ridiculous. You can go as far as oral sex. You can go as far as that. We all have different interpretations. So it's probably not a whole lot different with this conversation and this domain of people who are engaging with each other. You got to have a conversation about it so that there aren't any misunderstandings.
Absolutely.
What do you say sex is? Victoria
Oh
Joseph on
gosh,
sex.
it's
Go.
such that's it is a good question, and I think sex is whatever someone thinks it is. So what my definition is different than what a lesbian couple might think. Um, when I think of sex, I do think of the traditional P and V, but there is, when there's penetration involved, I know that's not always the case, especially when people who don't like penetration and they might like do things like scissoring, and that to me is sex. So it's like women having sex with each other. Gosh, yeah. So it's whatever anyone wants to, what it feels right for them to say. For me, when I think of sex, I think of penetration in one way or another, whether it's with like fingers or with toys or with penises. So that's what when I think of if someone's like we should have sex, that's where I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking oh we should just 69, we should just foreplay. Like to me, there's just like different areas of what I consider sex, at least for myself. But I definitely think that there are definitely different layers of what sex is to other people. And I think they just communicate like what that means to them and just clarifying that.
It seems like the wild, wild west. It really does. And the
Yeah.
only way through it is communication. And yet,
Yeah.
it's giving me all kinds of trouble. We love each other, but he was giving me all kinds of trouble about um, we shouldn't have to talk about all this stuff. We're just getting to know each other. But I'm always in defense of our emotions. So my next question that I looked up was, when does a relationship become romantic? Okay, so
Mm.
ChatGPT says that a relationship is generally considered romantic when it involves emotional intimacy, affection, a desire for connection that goes beyond friendship. It's not just about physical attraction, it's about the intention and the emotional bond between two people.
Hmm.
So there's emotional um, cheating, where you have this strong connection with somebody that you work with or somebody that you knew from the past. And maybe you only talk on the phone, or maybe there's just a text message every now and then, but it's meaningful, it's significant. And some people will say, well, that is clearly cheating. It's really the Wild West, isn't it?
Hmm.
So I don't know how else to get through it other than to be grown-ups and in the light of day, without drinking, drugs, anything like that, have these open-hearted conversations. I'm not drunk, I'm not on drugs, and we can have this conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It's definitely always important to communicate those things. And then, it does happen in the lifestyle where, you know, there's a couple, they meet another couple, and then maybe one half really hits it off. And then it gets a little tricky at some points because what happens often is that people do things separately. And so if you open yourself to do things separately, of course, things are going to grow. Like whether you're doing lots of dates together, you're having a lot of one on one time together, you're having a lot of like conversations together. So it is something that happens, organically. And then it's up to the individual to either keep growing that connection if it's okay with all those who are involved, or it's important to set boundaries and take a step back or have like, and then reevaluate like what, because oftentimes people go into the lifestyle and they're like, I'm more poly. Like I want the deeper connections. I want to have relationships. And so one of my biggest pieces of advice is that if you're interested in being a part of this, is being open to change. Always leaving room for communication, no matter if it might hurt. There's resources, there's help out there to have these difficult conversations. But if you don't, then resentment builds up, and then there is cheating that happens in these dynamics when someone wants to have a date with someone's wife, but then actually goes and has a secret threesome, and it ends in marriage. So messy stuff doesn't is not exclusive to non-monogamy. It also happens in non-monogamy, but typically that's like they're cheating. Where this one is just like it can get a little tricky. So it's always very, very important to like check in with your partner, see what's okay, see if there's open to exploration, and then if there is some like hesitation or there's like some areas that feel uncomfy, work through it. And that looks different for everyone.
So the issue that we were really wrestling with is, at what point do you have these
Oh,
conversations? I say, please have these conversations before it happens. Nobody ever called me
yeah.
on a Monday and said, darn it, how come I didn't sleep with that guy? It does not happen. Okay. So,
Yes. Yes.
um, what do you say? Let's just pretend that Victoria is out there. Maybe you and Ryan just meet today. And how do you open up the conversation? What do you say before anything happens? You're a grown up, you've got the language. What would you say to Ryan at the beginning if you're on maybe date number 2 or date number 3, about the type of relationship you'd like to have?
Okay. So what I would do if I was a single person and I want to broach the subject of non-monogamy with someone that I'm liking, is
Yeah.
that the question? Yeah. So I would, throughout meeting this person, I would start planting little conversational seeds. Like I would try to get a feel on how they feel about certain dynamics like that. I don't think I would right away, like, we would only be talking about friends and family and core values and all of a sudden be like, so what do you think about swinging? I think I would share like maybe I would. Maybe I would be like, so do you hold on, let me try to think for this for a second. Like, if there's like a show that I saw or a meme that I came across or a reel, like trying to feel them out, like I guess if we're talking about sexual desires too, that's important. So maybe when it comes to the point of talking about sex, that should be a conversation that should be had at time. So if you should be having the conversation about non-monogamy, if that's important to you before having sex, because when after you have sex with someone, you have those chemicals in your brain and you feel more connected with them and more like, open to it. So yeah, I think I would just maybe I guess I would just bring it up very casually. Like it's becoming more and more normalized. I'm sure they've heard of it before.
Mhm.
And if they're open to it, then you just kind of dig in closer and closer. But if they're like, "Oh, that's weird. That could never be me." I could be like, "What do you?" Then maybe like, "What are you worried about?" Like, and then maybe like, kind of like not salesy, but like the objections, right? Like, "Oh, you're worried about this, but there's this kind of resource. Is that of interest to you?" Or it's like, "Okay, I'm open to it. Let's do role play first." And then like kind of ease into it.
It's
Some people have
interesting.
it straight on the profile. So
That's
I
what I was
think it
going to
just
ask you. Your
mhm.
company, Birds of a Feather, it's designed for people who are interested in ethical non-monogamy, or they probably wouldn't be there. So you've already
Mhm.
asked the questions, haven't you?
Yes,
Can you
yes.
tell
So
us a
that
little
is
bit
like the,
more
the
about the
wonderful thing
questions?
about us matchmakers. We vet these questions ahead of time, so you know who you're going on a date with and where they sit with when it comes to non-monogamy, and then what type. Whereas you know, if you're out in the wild, you have to go on a handful of dates and figure out how to broach it. Um, and yeah, it's
But
definitely tricky.
so, when I created my software, there's men seeking men, men seeking women, bisexuals, whatever. I didn't go into all the different LGBTQ categories. I send those people to Tammy because she knows what all 48 of them are, and I don't. But um, what are your questions? What questions do you ask that I don't ask on my profile?
One of my questions that I have is, what is your preferred relationship dynamic? Monogamy, non-monogamy, or either?
Okay.
Yeah, so very simply, like, because there are people who are, there's a term called biamorous, I think, or gosh, I think it's called biamorous, where it's like they could either be monogamous or they could be non-monogamous and still feel completely happy in either situation. I probably
I
should look
think
up the
what
proper term, but yeah.
the reason why I have been professing for so many years to have these conversations before we go south of the border, like while our pants are still on, is
Hmm.
because of the degree of pain that I've seen people experience when what they thought was a relationship is not the same as what this other person thought was a relationship. The movie Fatal Attraction comes to mind. You remember that
Yeah.
one with the knives? Yeah. And the poor rabbit. Yeah, the poor rabbit. That was the saddest part of the movie. But I just say, if you're not comfortable enough talking about sex, you should just keep your
They
peace
should not be having it.
a while alone.
Agreed. Agreed. Some other questions that I have on mine are like, are you in a relationship? So, it's probably not as common. I mean, there actually, I think there is like marital status on other
Mhm.
matchmakers platforms, like if they're divorced or if they're this, if they're that. But for me, I do have the option, like I'm married. And so that person might be a polyamorous person that's in my database. I
Yep.
ask their sexuality because that is a wide range of different things. Like you mentioned, like being bi-curious. There's also a thing called being demisexual, which means you really need to have a emotional connection on more than anything. Or there's also asexual, which means that you don't like to have sex with people, but you find it joy in different ways. So I have a bunch of, hetero flexible is a fun one, homo flexible. So I have very niche questions on that. And then I also ask gender, where my options are male, female, and non-binary, which I actually was, so I use the Global Love database, and because of me, they add the non-binary gender on there, which is good to know when people join my database. I know with learning through Frankie, there are more, but it is a step closer to having more options for people who join databases.
I love it. I can tell that we are in a different climate today. When I first started my company in 2001 in Los Angeles, I remember we asked the question, what's your relationship status? I'm single, never married, I'm separated, I'm widowed, I'm married. And then we put, why are you here? It's like, you're in the wrong place. But I wouldn't choose to do that today because the world has broadened and we have conversations like this that used to be hidden behind closed doors. So it's fascinating. And I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed over the years that married somebody who later ended up being gay or later had a secret life and they discovered it. Well, these days, I'd like to see all of those things come up in advance
Exactly. Yes.
without judgment. See, that's the secret. Is just because somebody's preferences and lifestyle choices are different than ours doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. I mean, if somebody's Dexter, if somebody's a serial killer, that's another thing. We love
Yeah,
Dexter.
that's something different.
All right, so here is my next question. You and Ryan do a lot of coaching specifically with men, which I think is wonderful. So one of what I saw was that you provide strategic dating advice, particularly for men looking to improve communication, connection, and courtship skills in pursuit of lasting relationships. So what I'm dying to ask you is, in working with all these men over the years, what do they think they need? And what is it that they actually need in terms of coaching?
Oh my gosh. There's always something to work on when it comes to helping men in the dating. I would say the big, like simple but biggest one is that they don't think that their profile is important. They don't think their photos are important. And so they don't cater, like they give, because women, we are more, I would say, more intentional when it comes to dating. We're reading the profiles, we're reading the questions because we want to get to know you. We want to try to pull information out of you before we meet in person. And so the men, they give nothing to work with. They talk about, oh, I want my air fryer to be to come to the grave with me. Like that doesn't tell anybody anything other than you like air frying food. So I would say they think that that stuff is not important when it definitely is. I would also say that what are some other ones that are important? Well, when it comes to my particular niche, a lot of men think that just because these women are non-monogamous, that we are just very easy. Where actually the standards are higher in this community because we are so well informed of ourselves and what we're looking for in partners and what consent is and understanding body language, like how to plan dates and how so what happens sometimes in the lifestyle is that there's a couple and like there's a dynamic of being a hot wife, and so that means that the wife is free to play with men and go on dates with men and be courted, and oftentimes they record their fun time and she comes back to her husband and shares it, or he might view it. And so the men in these spaces want to have, they want to be in threesomes, they want to be a part of those experiences with these other men's wives, but they don't know how to date, they don't know how to court, they don't know how to have a good conversation. And so we have to remind them, like, yes, we are sex positive around here, but you have to date kind of traditionally and make us feel like safe and comfortable. And oftentimes, a big one actually that comes to mind is that men are very quick to trying to have the conversation about sex and non-monogamy and these experiences, and sex is a very hot topic. It's very exciting to talk about. And oftentimes you can talk about it forever. But you need to talk about other things other than sex. Like you have to have some care and some consideration and want to get to know the person ahead of time before that, because, a date can go by and you don't know anything about each other than the fun experiences that you had. So my advice when this happens is that I recommend that women lead with a sexual conversation and they'll bring it up when they're ready. So court them, compliments, like backstories, like whatever you need, talk about those things like you would. And then when she's ready to broach that subject, she will. And then you can kind of dive in based on her comfort level. So that's how I like to coach men.
I like it. And your program is a matchmaking program. So that means you have clients who have paid you to provide a series of introductions for them. And I'm assuming that every single time when you're creating that client's profile, it's very clear what type of relationship they're open to.
Hmm.
Now, for people who don't know about your company yet, or who maybe aren't in a position to hire a matchmaker or don't want to, and they're just going to be using Bumble or Match.com, do you recommend saying so on the profile that they are in favor of ethical non-monogamy, that that's the lifestyle they prefer?
Yes, I think that is something that is good information to have on an app from the get-go. There are apps that specifically have the filter on there that they're open to non-monogamy or monogamy. And so if that is an option, I do believe that they should have that as a filter on there. And then there are also very niche apps specifically for those who are of the more open-minded nature. There's one called Field, Feeld, and that is a good place to go. Although it is very, very competitive for men because there's an abundance of them on there. And so the women often get overwhelmed. And so it's important to be looking your best on an app like that because there are women on there that want to have this same kind of relationship dynamic, but these guys ruin it for themselves like so quickly. And then there's other
Oh,
niche
they just think
websites
all the
and stuff
girls,
like that.
they just think all the
Yeah.
girls are going to want to jump into bed quickly. Oh, this will be fun. Um,
Yeah.
so
So
it sounds to me like of all the people who've ever checked that box, I am non-monogamous. There are more men than there are women checking that box.
definitely, yes.
Yeah. Very interesting. So
Yeah.
there's
So I have
another,
the opposite problem as traditional matchmakers where you have an abundance of women and then you kind of maybe might struggle to have like men come to your events or finding lots of men for a female client. Whereas for me, I have the opposite problem where my female clients are very, I find matches for them easily. And then like, it's just a little bit harder to find matches for men, but they're out there.
yes, because of the competition. And it's got to be hard for you if you meet somebody at a Chamber of Commerce event or at the grocery store. All of us as matchmakers keep our eyes open and we're real sticky out there in the public. And so, how do you approach? I guess you just tell her who you are and what you do. And if she's like, ooh, then you just know she's not your person. But there may be a lot of people who's like, oh, I'd like to know more about that.
Yes, that is actually what happens often. I wouldn't say people, I honestly haven't had issues with people being like, "Ooh, no, could never be me," which has been like kind of pleasant. Like I was kind of expecting that after going out and being public, like people would have like a very quick reaction, being like, "Oh," but honestly, people have been like very mature and very intrigued about what I do. And then I love going to networking events and being in a group of people and I talking about what I do and I can see with my eyes like who lights up about the conversation. And then they tell me, "Oh, I'm interested," or "We should have a conversation after this." And so everywhere I go, that happens every time. So you never know who's into this stuff until you're having that conversation. So and it's great. I mean, I would recommend it. At least trying it for everyone, or at least having the
Another question.
conversation. So
There's one other question that just burns inside of me to ask, and it's related to the money stuff. Um, I asked a similar question to Tammy Shackley when we were talking about gay and lesbian relationships. Who is it who tends to be funding most things? Okay, so the money part's always a little tricky. I would imagine if there was a relationship between two people and they're sort of, normal middle income people, and one of them is having a relationship with somebody who's very wealthy and the gifts are coming in and, oh, let's go to Paris together. And the other person's like, well, I didn't get to go to Paris. How do you handle all of that?
So there was actually at one of my recent events, there was a friend of mine there who his wife wasn't able to make it to the event because she was with somebody else on vacation. And he's like, it's someone in a totally different tax bracket than me. She's out on yachts and she's doing this. And he was happy for her. So that's where the compersion comes in. Where like, I want my partner to have these amazing experiences. Like, please go out and he's able to date women that he can, and she's out there living her best life. And he is in a position where like he like a lot of times in like poly or open relationships, they don't want to hold their partner back. Like if you have the opportunity to have a great time, like you should go out and do it. Um, and then I think on the other end, what happens, like that's like the good part of it. but I've seen situations where maybe there's like a poly relationship and the man has girlfriends and the wife maybe chooses to be monogamous to him. And so then he's spending lots of money on his new partners. And so then she might feel like, well, if you're spending X amount on this person, like you should be spending that amount on me. So I think that that conversation is had a lot with a lot of poly people, and figuring out like what's okay, what's not, like what we're budgeting, and making sure everyone like feels like they're well taken care of. Because I think when it comes to poly, it can get expensive when you have multiple relationships and there's like gifts involved and Christmas and dates and all that. So I think having that money conversation is like good. Oftentimes, what people do is that they have two separate bank accounts and then they have a joint account. So it's like, okay, you can do whatever you want with your money as long as like everything is kind of getting paid for. And I feel like things feel like balance. So, but I'm sure that shifts for a lot of people. And
Whoa.
like, especially with poly people too, who might have like partners who are monogamous, but they're poly with other people. It's like, whose house do we go to? Like, they can't because they have to buy like hotel rooms, or they don't want to kick out this partner or that partner, and it's like, what do you do? So often what people in polyamorous relationships do is that they have their own separate bedrooms. And so, husband in one room, wife in the other, they make it their little cave, they make it their special to them, and that way they can have partners over without feeling like they're sharing bed sheets. But when they're, living their normal day-to-day life, they'll have sleepovers in each other's room or whoever is. Yeah, so that's a common
That's just
solution to
got
a
to
lot
be
of
wild.
polyamorous people.
You each have your own bedroom, okay? And you watch your show together, and then somebody comes over, and so your spouse is in the other room with somebody else having a whoop-de-doo, and there's noises, and there's yelling and screaming and things that they're not normally hearing from their spouse. They're like, "Whoa." Is there some jealousy that happens like, whoa, you seem to have a lot more fun with that person than you do with me?
Oh, I'm sure that does happen. People, so I guess in a situation that happens often is that women come into these spaces who have never squirted before. They didn't know that they could do it. They didn't know like there was different techniques, and so they come into these spaces with very experienced hands, and then all of a sudden, someone's able to make their wife have a waterfall, and it's like, how did you do that? And so either you can be upset about it and be like, why couldn't I figure it out? Or you can come in with like the knowledge of like, how did you do that? And then kind of learn from there. So it's like, sure, you can be like, oh, she's never done that with me. But it's like, you should come from, instead of being like upset about it, you should be like, how can I get to that point with you?
You
Like,
should
what did
be
they
happy
do?
because
And
I,
like make it like a learning experience.
right, like if somebody finally figured out how to have an orgasm and they never had ever had one before with their
Hmm.
partner, and then they figured out how to have one, and now they can share that with the other person, that can be a benefit to the other person. Have you seen couples that started this way and then one or the other just didn't want to live that way anymore and they wanted to just be together? And have they been able to make the transition, or does it usually not work?
Um, I so there's a few things or a few different scenarios that people do in that case. If there's a couple and they're swingers and the woman, for example, doesn't want to swing anymore, she maybe doesn't have like the same like libido or the enthusiasm to go out and meet people and try to have a forward connection, like, because it can be a lot of work. It can be a lot. And she just kind of wants to slow down. So what this particular couple in that I have in my mind, what they did is that she open the relationship to him. Like he is allowed to go on dates and have fun with women while she is happy to be at home. They have a couple of kids now and that's what she wants to do. So that is like one option. If And then sometimes what other people do is that they'll be non-monogamous and they're like, okay, I want to take a break. And then they agree to be monogamous for as long as like whatever that feels right. And then if, it might continually just be the same. Okay, actually, yes, this happened. So I had a friend who was in a traditional marriage and they opened it up. And so they had, they had a few play dates. She kind of had a boyfriend for 8 to 9 months. And then he had a few, hookups here and there. But they just felt like it was so much work. Like it was too much work. It like wasn't even enjoyable for them. And they were like, I'm so happy to have you. Like I don't even want other people. And so they went back to monogamy and they have a baby. And then I asked her, I checked in with her. I'm like, are you glad you had that experience? And she's like, yes, because it opened the communication for us, which is all I wanted for them. I just didn't want to have the risk of them cheating on each other or wondering if they couldn't make it work or make this happen. but they did, and they're living a monogamous, happy lifestyle today, even though they had opened it up and closed it. So I've also
Amazing.
seen lots of people like try to open it up and close it, and then things end. So when it comes to non-monogamy and become and getting in these spaces, you shouldn't join this community when you have relationship issues already, because what happens is coming into these spaces will expedite what needs to happen. So either you will sink or swim. You know, things will end or things will get better. So
Uh-huh.
I know all these situations personally from people that I talked to and learned from, and so it can happen in any which way, honestly. So the answer to your question is that I've seen it go horribly bad, and I've also seen it go perfectly great. So
It sounds similar to the question, well, if our relationship isn't so great, we'll just have a baby. That'll make it all better. Yeah, right. Right?
yeah, or we'll just have a threesome. That'll help the relationship.
Oh, yeah, that would be better.
No.
There was one other thing that I looked up, signs that a relationship has become romantic. Like at what point is something no longer
Mhm.
just platonic, but actually romantic? And so one dimension is mutual attraction. There's a spark, emotional or physical, that draws you to each other. Intentional affection, you express care through gestures like holding hands, cuddling, saying, I love you. An exclusive emotional bond. This was Chat GPT, so maybe it hasn't caught up with the time, but you prioritize each other emotionally, often sharing personal thoughts, dreams, and vulnerabilities. That could be an emotional bond without necessarily being exclusive, right?
Mhm.
Yep. Depending, you got to know where the lines are. And then
Mhm.
desire for partnership. You start imagining a future together, making plans and seeing each other as a team.
Mhm.
That could all be happening with ethical non-monogamy. You just have to be honest
Mhm.
with it. And then shift in communication. Conversations become more emotionally charged, intimate, and frequent. It's interesting, isn't it? So romance is really not a whole lot different in this domain, but it requires an inordinate amount of mature communication.
Yes, very mature conversation. Being definitely need, like, if you want to make something like that work, like polyamory, you do have to have a lot of emotional intelligence and great communication skills. And I think this is similar to like what you asked before, and it's like I would agree those levels, and that sounds like accurate, even in these E&M spaces.
There's something else that occurs to me. I would have imagined it, but I didn't think of it, that you would have, as the matchmaker, a lot more men in your community than you have women. So the women who are listening, especially women who are like recently divorced or they're recently widowed or they're recently out of a relationship, they're not ready for the big one. Is this a possibility for places for them to go to meet some people without a lot of pressure? Um, do you recommend it or not if they're really monogamous and they're just kind of in between?
No, I highly recommend it. I think after a monogamous relationship that has ended, and either on good terms or bad terms, women are very much welcomed in these spaces. It's a great way to feel supported, sexually liberated, not judged, and you can dictate how close you want to be with someone. Like how, if you want to be good friends, if you want it to just be like a hookup, do you want to have more experiences with people without like the commitment? This is like the perfect community to be a part of. And there's a term for women who come into these spaces, and so a lot of women in this community are bisexual, but not all of them. So you kind of come into this community and you figure out like what you do and don't like. You might become with some curiosity, and so if they're bisexual, then they're considered unicorns, which everyone loves unicorns. They make everything better, they balance out parties better, and they're just a lot of fun. And then um you know, you make friends very fast being a single woman in this community. Like the girls want to be friends with you, the guys want to connect with you, couples want to connect with you. And frankly, we just, it's very safe for them. We want to make sure that they're having a good time. And if they are trying to figure themselves out, you have tons of helping hands that just want to make sure that you're having a great time.
You know, it seems quite liberating. one of the common denominators that I've discovered in recent years in working with people, especially in doing my boot camps and all the consultations that I do with people, I'm not just looking for my next high-level matchmaking client. I'm not. I'm obsessed with and deeply interested in the process of love and how it starts and how it stays and how we can evolve it over time. Well, it seems like this is a wonderful opportunity for a lot of the women in my life, especially women who get to be in their 50s and 60s. They don't need to be married. Their purpose in dating is totally different than it was when they were 26 and they were thinking about marriage, babies, traditional. And now their lives
Hmm.
are great. They don't need to upset that apple cart for anybody who doesn't meet their most important criteria, right?
Hmm.
So while it's like, meanwhile, maybe you're looking for, hoping for that love of your life experience that you haven't yet had, or haven't had since your husband died, or haven't had since that one relationship you had in college. And here you are, you don't need a fix. You don't want to fix anybody else.
Hmm.
It's an opportunity to explore in ways that are less constricting because the interview questions are going to be a whole lot different. It's not going to be, are you looking for marriage? And by when do you want to have babies? And it's not about that.
Hmm. Yeah, you're figuring out like what you guys can do together or like where there's similarities and how you guys can have fun together.
It's amazing. All right. Anything else you want to share with our people? How do they find you? What can they do? What are their options?
Yeah, so if you're interested in joining my free dating database, it can be found on birdsofafeathermatchmaking.com. I also have Instagram and social media accounts under ENM Matchmaker or Birds of a Feather MM. I can be reached through various means in that way. Happy to answer any kind of questions. And yeah, I just if you're and especially if you're a woman in this space, like I'm here for you. I am, I'm your cheerleader. I can answer any questions that you have, any concerns you might have, and try to like just settle your nerves or give you even resources. There's podcasts, there's books. Depending on where you live, I can suggest like clubs, or even like if you're interested in like kink, there's websites for that. There's dungeons for that. There's so much opportunity for single women, and they should definitely feel empowered to explore at any point in their life, whether they have curiosities about everything, they should be explored because it is amazing. And the more you learn, the better. And even if it's like learning about yourself. So I can be reached in those kind of ways. Happy to have any of those conversations with anyone. And yeah, I just want what's best for us all. So I think the world would be better if everyone had the conversation about ethical non-monogamy and to avoid, potential cheating. And that way, or if someone does want to be non-monogamous, at least having that conversation so that they can give their partner the opportunity to opt in or opt out before anyone gets their heart broken. So that's kind of
And,
where I'm coming from
and
for any.
ideally, before the pants come off,
Yes,
because
agreed.
it's only the lack of communication that causes extreme disappointment and shock. And I can't believe that person did that to me. Well, they're coming from a different place. It doesn't mean it's necessarily,
Yeah.
you got to cover the bases these days. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Victoria, for bringing
Thank
this.
you. This was great.
Really
It's a lot of
appreciate.
fun. Thanks for having
And
me.
ladies and gentlemen, get out there and explore. And if you feel like this is an avenue that you haven't yet embraced, but it seems like in listening here, it's calling to you, go to birdsofafeathermatchmaking.com and start engaging. And there are no rules. I won't judge you. You can tell me, Julie, guess what? I've decided that I want to be an ethically non-monogamous person. Cool. We'll put that on your profile. It's okay with me. All right.
Oh,
Thank you so much for your time.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you go out there and transform me to we one way or another.